Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast, episode number 23. And we have now wrapped up the American League and National League Divisional Series. As we recorded this, the Yankees got the final out to knock off the Cleveland Guardians to advance to the ALCS. So everything is set. Let's go ahead and start with a recap of the NLDS series. We'll start with the defending World Series champions, the Atlanta Braves. They go down to my dark horse, the Philadelphia Phillies. And I gave up on them. I don't want too much credit today, and the Phillies are going to be dark horses because I thought their season was in deep trouble, especially when they fired Joe Girardi. But this team all of a sudden has all the momentum in the world on their side. They are playing really good baseball. That home field advantage is just electric at Citizens Bank Park. The Braves, they just couldn't get the great starting pitching that they've had all year. Their starters all struggled. The lineup for Philadelphia has really turned up a notch. Bryce Harper's hitting the ball really well. Rhys Hoskins is hitting with a lot of power. Kyle Schwarber setting the table. It's up and down this Phillies lineup, and the biggest concern was that defense. They look pretty good defensively too, especially when they have their guys, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola on the mound, just shutting down everything. This team's a team to be reckoned with. They're a tough one to take out in any postseason series.
Yeah, I was most shocked because playoff ball is usually a lot more about depth. And this series in particular, it was more our superstars are playing better than your superstars. And if that's the case, I mean, credit to the Phillies. Their guys showed up a lot better than the Braves did. So I don't think anyone saw it happening outside of Pennsylvania, but we have the defending world champions are out at the hands of somebody who a month ago we did not think was going to make the playoffs. So
yeah. And the Phillies 5-1 in the postseason. They've now beaten two division champions after taking out the champions of the NL Central and the Cardinals, and now the NL East and the Braves. They can't get the trifecta because of the other NLDS series, which was a stunner. The San Diego Padres taking out the LA Dodgers 3-1. I don't know what happened with the Padres, but I mentioned it that they look like a team that reminded me of the Braves when we did our ranking of wildcard teams. They felt like the Braves from last year, and they're playing like the Braves from last year. They're getting really good starting pitching. The bats have awoken. Manny Machado's just on fire right now, but it's up and down that lineup. Josh Hader's figured things out. This is the exact team we thought we were going to get at the trade deadline. Let's focus on the Padres just for a second before we talk about the Dodgers, because this team's clicking on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say enough good things. It seems like everybody woke up at the exact same time. We mentioned Hader's struggles when he first got to the club. We mentioned that pitching, that starting rotation name-wise was fantastic, but it just seemed like, they had a rough outing. Are we which version of them are we going to get? And man, when it comes to playoff ball, they came ready to play.
Yeah, Joe Musgrove's been insane. Yu Darvish, he's been the most consistent guy for them all year. He's kept that going into the playoffs. Blake Snell, I still think you want to get a little bit more from him, but he hasn't been bad at all for San Diego either. Let's talk about the Dodgers. This team, I think everyone kind of just assumed they were going to be in the NLCS. The question wasn't, were they going to get to the NLCS? Was anyone going to beat them at all en route to a World Series title? Well, the playoff Dodgers, they just have issues. I don't know what it is. Every time they get to the postseason, I don't know if it's managing. I don't know if it's, trying to coast, believing in the hype too much. But they came out and they were flat the entire series, especially, I mean, you get up 1-0 and you lose 3 straight to a team you call your little brothers. Guess what? Little brother ain't so little anymore because they just put a beat down on you.
Yeah, it just seemed like Dodgers could not string together the hits like they have been all year long. I mean, that's a team that can power the ball and make a game go their direction with any swing of the bat. And it seemed like, yeah, they'd score a run here and they'd score a run there, but they just did not have that offensive prowess that they had all year long. And then you get to, postseason struggles, and that's usually a pitcher's curse, right? And it seemed like they just had some really bad innings every once in a while that they couldn't catch up offensively with. So I don't know if it's because, those postseason games are too much for them. But I feel like everyone's shocked. I feel like that not the entire Southern California because everyone's there, but I know Giants fans are now Padres fans, and everyone is just, you're either cheering, wow, David beat Goliath, or the wind's knocked out of you. Like, how on earth did we let that happen?
Yeah, Sean, that you guys have seen on our picks, is a Dodgers fan. And I was talking to him and another buddy of mine that are both Dodgers fans, and they seemed stunned when it happened. They really just seemed shocked. I don't think they really had processed like what just happened. It was crazy to see. And now, of course, Trey Turner likely going to be gone this next season. We'll see what happens with Clayton Kershaw. This team's going to look very different come next year. They're still going to be a World Series contender, but man, this team felt destined to get to the World Series. Let's now preview the NLCS real quick before we talk about American League. Phillies and Padres, NLCS. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me at any point this year that this would be the match. No. I would have said, you're a liar. You're a straight up liar. Here we are. I think the Padres have the better rotation when they're on. I think they have the better bullpen. But this Phillies team, if they can keep hitting like they are right now, that pitching staff is gonna always be pitching with a lead, it feels like. I don't know if you're going to be able to feel confident picking either of these teams to get to the World Series. This really feels like a coin toss matchup. I don't know what is going to happen. Two wildcard teams that are 4 wins away from a trip to the World Series.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you. I think rotation wise, I'd almost give the advantage to Philly, at least with the way that they played most of the year. And I think that's what it's going to come down to is can they calm these insane Slam Diego bats that seem to have woken up all at the same time. So I think I'm going to have to give the overall edge to San Diego, just the way that they've been playing recently. But my goodness, the NL is just been one shocking upset after another. So who knows? I mean, they could be fighting each other, and then the announcer calls a third person into the ring and hits him with a stunner. I don't know what to expect here.
Jacob, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I think you might already know. You didn't pick a single National League Series, right? I only picked one.
I know.
It's really mind-boggling what just happened over there. But I'm really excited for the NLCS. I think that makes this postseason series exciting. If it would have been the Braves against the Padres or the Dodgers against the Phillies, I wouldn't have been as excited as, say, a Braves-Dodgers, or here we are, Phillies-Padres. So I'm intrigued what's going to happen. Game 1 tonight, it'll be Zach Wheeler against Yu Darvish. By the time you guys are seeing this, Game 1 already happened, so you'll know who takes that one. What's your pick for Game 1? Just a quick Game 1 pick.
I'm going to say Philly comes out with a quick lead. I feel like that's what's been happening recently, and San Diego climbs back.
Well, I'm going to give it to the Padres in Game 1. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now let's head over to the American League. Let's start with the series that literally just ended. The New York Yankees beating the Cleveland Guardians in 5. It was a wild series. It felt like the Yankees really were in control most of this series. I mean, Cleveland had to come back to get that game at home in Game 3. Other than that, it felt like it was the Yankees series to win the entire way. They did trip up once in the Bronx, but other than that, they played really good baseball. Aaron Judge finally did hit a home run in Game 5, got the power going. Giancarlo Stanton looks pretty solid. This lineup looks like they might be starting to figure things out. I'm really hoping we get the best New York Yankees for the ALCS, because I still don't think we saw it against Cleveland. I have some big-time issues with Cleveland's decision-making. Not going Shane Bieber in Game 5 just makes absolutely no sense to me. But I think what it finally came down to was what you had talked about. Your biggest concern with the Guardians was, and it was that lineup. It was that youth. Could they continue to get the job done in the postseason?
I'm still going to say weather was a huge factor this series, and it's going to play a huge factor now that the Yankees have to play tomorrow. I mean, that is a quick turnaround between some long series, whereas Houston is quite well rested after their shutout. So that was a big factor. I did not like it. That was some unfortunate events, let's say.
Yeah.
And that could have played a fact in who pitched when. I don't know. I don't know all of the details, but I know that it was an interesting move to not put your guy in a must-win situation for sure.
Yeah, fascinating. It makes absolutely zero sense.
Yeah, but Yankees, they can take a game or take a game back with one swing of the bat, especially in Yankee Stadium. And that's exactly what they did. They just powered with the long ball and got it done. Even games where I'm like, okay, this is looking really, really good for Cleveland. And then you flip the station and come back and it's like, oh, never mind. So we'll see what the Yankees can do against the Astros, but
Aaron Judge was off to a horrendous start in that series. I think he was 0 for 8 with 7 Ks after the first couple of games. He got things going in Cleveland, but you just mentioned the Yankees' power. I mean, if they can come back in the blink of an eye. Harrison Bader was really good against Cleveland. That's a guy who we circled that trade, Harrison Bader for Jordan Montgomery. It kind of confused us. Well, the Yankees are in the ALCS. The Cardinals didn't win a playoff game. So I guess that answers that question. We'll see what they can do in the ALCS because it is going to be an emotional one. It was an emotional one for us in the other ALDS. I'm not ready to talk about this one yet, but it's time to. The Astros sweep the Mariners in one of the most competitive sweeps in the history of baseball, I'd say. I think this series was over after game 1 when Houston came back to win it. When they hit that walk-off home run by Yordan Alvarez to come back after the Mariners had all that momentum coming off of their comeback in Toronto, I knew right there. Oh, you had Justin Verlander, you beat Justin Verlander, and you couldn't beat Houston down the stretch. Game 2, again, it was Yordan Alvarez, an opposite field home run that did them in. And then that game 3 in Seattle, I was there, and it just felt like, how are we not scoring? The crowd that was supposed to be the big X factor, they started to fade after that marathon of a ball game, 18 innings, believe it or not, because they were up pretty much. We were up pretty much the entire time. It was yelling, getting fired up, and then, of course, concessions closed after a certain point. The game's still going. Not a run was scored until that 18th inning home run by Jeremy Pena. It sucked, but I think many Mariners fans are still optimistic for the future. We'll have a Mariners minis where we'll really dive in on the Mariners, but I mean, competitive is the word I'd use to describe this series. It was just Houston had the depth, they had the better rotation, they had those guys who could go longer in ball games out of the bullpen. The Mariners really didn't.
Yeah, I think what I took away from this series more than anything was the Mariners can play with anyone. They have the ability to go out and play, and it was literally 3 swings of the bat. 3 swings of the bat, and they could have swept Houston. I mean, it was that close of a series the entire time. And you mentioned it, that what did we say before this series? We said if Mariners can get to the starting pitchers and get them off the mound, our bullpen is a stronger, more fearful bullpen than anything that the Astros are throwing out there. And we did just that. We took care of business. We got them off the mound early. I mean, I'm talking Justin Verlander. I'm talking McCullers. I'm talking Valdez, like guys that for years have just dominated games. When they are on the mound, you are expecting 7 innings of 1 or 2 run ball. And we gave them 4 or 5 runs and hurried them off in the 4th or 5th inning. I might have to look back on this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that their starter outlasted ours in any of the 3 games.
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we did what we needed to do to win the game. And then our bullpen didn't have the stamina, didn't have the ability to go the full distance that we needed them to. And sometimes that was a long distance. I mean, you played 2 games in one. You literally played a double header without a intermission there in game 3. And they had guys who were ex-starters that came out and they were out for 3 innings in relief. I think one came out for 4.
Yeah, Luis Garcia in the final game.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I really wanted to end it against Montero. That would have been just perfect. And we had the opportunities, and it just didn't go our way. But Mariners belonged in that series, in that postseason. They showed, hey, you guys counted us out against Toronto. We swept them. And then we were real close every step of the way against the best team in the AL by far. So you say San Diego's not so little of a brother anymore. The Mariners are not so little brother anymore when it comes to the AL West.
And I will say one last thing about the Mariners before we talk about Houston. We don't want to spend too much time on the Mariners again. We have Mariners minis coming out this week. The roster configuration is was a big issue. I don't understand why Kurt Casale's on the roster as a third catcher, and yet you're leaving guys like Marco Gonzalez and Chris Flexen off who can really eat innings. There were some issues there from the start for the Mariners, but hopefully they'll learn from that. But the Astros, I mean, that's all it takes from them. A couple swings, their pitching is going to keep them in games every single time out there. And all it takes is a swing. And that was with Jose Altuve not recording a hit in the ALDS. He stunk in the ALDS. I'll just straight up say he was awful. If he can get going, I still stand by it. There's not an easy out in this lineup. Not a single one. They have a great defensive catcher in Martin Maldonado. You're not going to be able to steal very many bases on them, if any. Of course, the Yankees, that's not their game anyway. It's going to be, can you keep them in the ballpark? This series, this is the one that everyone's wanted besides maybe Dodgers, Astros. It's the Yankees and the Astros. I mean, it was the walk-off home run by Altuve off of Aroldis Chapman, who, of course, is gone now.
Yeah.
There's bad blood. There's a lot of bad blood. I'm very interested in this series. If you made me choose just one of these CS series to watch, it'd be this one, because I think there's going to be a lot of not just on-field stuff going on.
Yeah. And these are some tiny dimensioned ballparks with some very big bats coming up. I am expecting, even with the elite pitching on both ends, obviously Astros health-wise definitely have the advantage there, but every single pitch you are going to run the risk of it being a game changer and it going over the fence, home or away. You just watch out. It's going to be a fun one for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. Of course, that series just solidified moments ago when the Yankees finished off the Guardians. They've already announced game 1 starters, though. Jameson Taillon will take on Justin Verlander in game 1. Verlander, he's got playoff issues, that's for sure. He's coming in after that game against the Mariners with an ERA of 13.5, but we know Justin Verlander, what he's capable of any given night. It is going to be a very fun one. I can't wait for that series to get underway. So again, we've got Yankees, Astros in the ALCS, Phillies, Padres in the NLCS. The winners will take on one another in the World Series. With the end of the season, we normally have the awards, MVP, Gold Glove, you got Silver Slugger. We decided we were going to go with the opposite. We're going to go with our anti-awards. These are the guys who did not fulfill their requirements, what you expect from them. So we've got the Hold Glove. We've got the Slacking Slugger. We couldn't come up with a good one for Cy Young. We had Cy Old.
I had a few, but he didn't like them. So.
We're not going to use those. Yeah. And then we have, of course, the easy least valuable player as well. So we're going to go ahead and go through those. We're going to start with the Hold Glove Award. This is a guy who was a defensive liability for their team. I knew the route many expected us to go, so I went off path. I went somewhere else. Look, why don't you go ahead and start, because I think most people are going to be thinking along your lines.
I tried to take the less beaten path, but I couldn't give it to anyone but Javier Baez. He had as many defensive errors as he did offensive walks this year. That is unheard of. That is not a good factoid stat to have. The offensive production just wasn't there for how much of a defensive liability he was. 26 errors for a shortstop. You can't do that. You can't. You talk about the Mendoza line. They're going to have a Baez line where it doesn't matter what your bat's at. If you are just giving up free passes like that, you're not going to be employed. And he just got paid. That was not what they paid him for.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely brutal year for Javi Baez in his introduction to Detroit. So I went a different route. I already teased. I went Austin Nola, the catcher for the San Diego Padres. I went here because he had 5 pass balls this season, which was most among catchers. He had 6 errors. Of course, pass balls count as that. But there were 57 stolen base attempts against him. He only caught 13 runners. They were getting plenty of extra bases. He caught 834 and 2/3 innings. That was fewer than most other catches, the other starting catchers on these teams. And yet he had more issues than all of them. So Austin Nola, not a good season. An incredible trade still from the Mariners getting rid of him, even though he's still playing. So thank you, San Diego. But yeah, I went with the catching direction, and he just was one of the worst here this season. A really bad year for Austin Nola. Let's go to our Slacking Slugger. This one hits close to home for me. I'll start this one off. Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker was supposed to be the guy in that trade that brought over Eugenio Suarez and sent guys like Jake Fraley and Justin Dunn over to Cincinnati. Jesse Winker was terrible this year. He just hit 219, only 14 home runs, 53 RBIs, struck out 103 times. This is in a defensive award, so I won't talk about his just putrid defense either. And news coming out today that it sounds like he's not really liked in the clubhouse either. All sorts of issues, work ethic problems. He was terrible. This sounds like he'd be headed for a nasty divorce if he doesn't turn things around, because his introduction to Seattle, same level as Javi Baez's introduction to Detroit.
Yeah, I think all Jesse Winker had going for him was pizza and fighting.
Yeah.
And that was rough to watch. I texted one of my buddies today and was like, it looks like you were not the only one that was constantly fed up with Winker. So we'll see how that plays out over the early parts of the off season. Mine, none other than Joey Gallo. You just could not give it to anyone else. We have joked about some of his awful stats all year long. The Yankees brought him in with high expectations. He was a good Texas player. They quickly wheeled him out of town. Nearly a full year of disappointment. Batting 159 with 12 home runs for the Yankees is not going to cut the mustard.
With the short porch.
Yeah. That only improved ever so slightly as he went to LA. I mean, hey, at least his slugging percentage isn't looking like a decent batting average anymore. But that was still it was a very rough year for the Rooster. So we'll see how he goes, but I'm not expecting too much over the next little bit of time for Joseph there.
Yeah, and some of the quotes that you heard from him all throughout the year were just heartbreaking. I mean, they were really, really sad, depressing quotes. So I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping he finds success. Hopefully, he just has to put the disaster in the Bronx behind him and he can move on and start finding some success with a fresh start next season. Let's go to our anti-Cy Young, whatever you want to call it. If you have a good name for it, let us know. We'd love to hear it.
The Cy Young.
This one,
I'm telling you. Telling you, that's it.
Stop. We decided to go. I decided to go with Jose Barrios for the Toronto Blue Jays. This guy was supposed to be the big get last trade deadline from Minnesota. He looked great as a Twin. His first full year with Toronto, he stunk. He was awful. 5.23 ERA in 172 innings, allowed 103 runs. 100 of them were earned, so it wasn't like the defense was hurting him. Only allowed 45 walks, which shows guys were just hitting the ball off of him. He was giving up hard contact consistently all throughout the year. Never even saw him in the postseason. I don't think he would have started in a game 3 if Toronto would have taken game 2. I think it would have been Ross Stripling. Barrios, man, what a nightmare year for him. He was awful.
I feel like you could have given it to a couple of Blue Jays. Let's be honest. But I went another path. I went with Chris Sale. At least he's replacing the TV that he smashed, right? That saves the team a little bit of money. But when you pay someone $30 million to throw 5 2/3 innings, that's a rough investment, especially on a club that's struggled with injuries and needed some serious help to prevent them from flopping in the exact fashion that they did. I mean, that was a loaded division. And I did not expect them to be, at the bottom of that scrum by the time that the end of the season came around. And they needed guys that they were paying to produce, and it just wasn't happening this year.
Yeah, terrible year for the Boston Red Sox. Another terrible year for Chris Sale. It feels like those are really stacking up for him. Now it's time for the big one. The least valuable player. This is the lowest esteemed award, I guess you could say, for the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Jacob, I'm going to let you start. Who was your LVP for the 2022 season?
I have to go with Fernando Tatis Jr. here. That is a big old paycheck getting cashed for absolutely zero production. Out of all of the zeros in baseball, he is probably the most expensive, definitely the most distracting for his club. It's a shame. It's a real shame to see.
Yeah, it looked like he's going to be the face of the game. Yeah, he's not the face of his own team anymore. He's not going to be their starting shortstop when he's able to come back. Ha-Seong Kim is a great, great player. He's going to not let that spot go. My LVP is what's worse than not helping your team win games? That's Fernando Tatis. Yeah, helping him lose games. That's what Patrick Corbin did. Starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
This guy might be the worst starting pitcher on the planet right now. That's including you, Jacob. So congratulations, because Patrick Corbin was terrible. He had a 6.31 ERA, a 6.31 ERA in 152 2/3 innings, allowed 210 hits. That led baseball. 119 runs with 107 earned. That led baseball. 27 home runs allowed. That is a stupid number of home runs. 49 walks. So again, wasn't walking a ton of guys. 128 strikeouts, a 1.697 whip. He was allowing almost 2 base runners per inning, Jacob.
Ooh.
He made $23 million this season. That is stupid.
I'm not saying that I could do better, but I could do just about that bad for a heck of a lot less money.
A heck of a lot less money. So I really looked at the financial aspect. I thought about Steven Strasburg. He didn't pitch, so I don't think he really was effective. I also looked at Anthony Rendon, but at least he drove in some runs, I guess. Patrick Corbin didn't do anything at all this year besides lose the Washington Nationals games. and lose support from the fans because that guy was on that World Series team. They don't care. They want him gone. They want him gone yesterday. I don't know if anyone's going to take a flyer on him anymore either. Remember, he was the one a lot of people were looping in like, oh, you want Juan Soto? You're going to have to take this guy too. I think most teams were like, you know what? You can keep Juan Soto then. This guy's awful. So there are our anti-awards for the 2022 MLB season. Let us know who you think should have been nominated or at least talked about for one of these. And let us know if you found this interesting, want us to do this for, say, the NBA, NFL, everything come the end of the season. So it was a fun little thing for us to do, a little spoof. But that is going to do it for our opening segment for baseball today. We're going to talk about some historic baseball coming up next with the Baltimore Orioles, Mount Rushmore. I know you know who number 1 and probably number 2 are. What about 3 and 4? Well, it's not as hard as you thought it would be. We'll talk about our top 4 Orioles of all time coming up next here on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
Alderson's Awards West Printwares is your one stop to tell the world about your school, club, or business. Spread the word on jackets, shirts, hats, and more from Awards West Printwares in Centralia. Awards West Printwares offers fast service of quality products including screen printing and embroidery done on site. They offer a wide variety of advertising specialties at great prices and delivered right to your door. For a full catalog, go online to aldersons.net. For maximum impact, Aldersons Awards West Printwares is ready to serve you today. If you have suffered a personal injury that wasn't your fault, the attorneys at Rogers, Key, Card, and Strophe work hard to get you a fair settlement. Managing partner Scott Key spearheads the personal injury practice that features decades of experienced attorneys to represent you with a proven history of successful verdicts and settlements. You can find them at budbaylaw.com to schedule a free consultation with Scott Key.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. It is time for another edition of our Mount Rushmore series. This week, we head over to Baltimore for the Baltimore Orioles Mount Rushmore. Kind of talks about there'd be a battle for 4th. That's because the top 3, I think, were no-brainers, and it turns out number 4 wasn't as
Kind of
tough
a no-brainer.
as I thought about. But there's only 6 guys even mentioned in this little segment for both of us. The Orioles,
I've got a 7th, but
you do have a 7th. You're right. There are 6 Baltimore Orioles in the Hall of Fame. One of them is Earl Weaver, and we already mentioned we're not doing managers or anything. Right. So he was obviously going to be out. But let's go ahead and kick things off with, I think if you didn't have this guy come to your mind when you hear the word Baltimore Orioles, you need to do something. Yeah, you got all sorts of problems.
Educate yourself.
It's Cal Ripken Jr. I mean, there's no question about it. He was just an incredible role model, not just incredible ball player, incredible role model. There were so many kids that looked up to him from the start of his career to the very end. Love that city of Baltimore. Love that organization. 276, 340, 447 slash line in his career with the Orioles. 431 home runs, 1,695 RBIs, 1,129 walks, a 788 career OPS, franchise leader, and obviously games played, hits, runs, doubles, home runs, RBIs, and of course, the historic consecutive games played streak at 2,632. Also, one of my favorite stories about Cal Ripken Jr. is his final All-Star game in Seattle in 2001. Where he was voted the starting third baseman. And Alex Rodriguez, I don't like Alex Rodriguez, but I do appreciate what he did here, making Cal Ripken go play short because he said this guy was the greatest shortstop when he was in his prime. Actually, Cal Ripken was not happy about that at all. He said he didn't like surprises at all. He wanted to go play third base, worried about making a mistake. But he says, looking back on it now, it was a really special moment, a really cool moment that he was grateful Alex Rodriguez did. So Cal Ripken Jr., I mean, the greatest Oriole of all time, without question.
Yeah, just Iron Man, right? I mean, You just can't put it in any other words. Won a Rookie of the Year, 2 MVP awards, went to 19 straight All-Star games, got 2 All-Star game MVPs, won a home run derby in 91. How many shortstops can say that they've won a home run derby? I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know it's a short list if there are any other than him.
I can't think of another one.
Yeah. 2 Gold Gloves, 8 Silver Sluggers, and a Roberto Clemente Award. Led the Orioles in games, at-bats, hits, runs, RBIs, extra base hits, doubles, homers, total bases, walks, assists, and double plays. His numbers retired, obviously. Got that statue going. Aside from being one of the greatest ambassadors the game has ever seen, just the way he played on a daily basis was so different, so much more complete than anyone else doing it. Here you had a 6'4", 200-pound guy playing shortstop of all places. You don't have that in the game. He was a power bat, didn't have as much maneuverability as these 5'8", 160-pound guys playing shortstop. So the guy practically invents defensive scouting reports and tendencies to help give him that edge to be able to play such a demanding defensive position like shortstop. Pair that with some of the best fundamental ball in the history of the sport, and you have a guy that's tied 20th for all-time fielding percentage at shortstop ever. Over 21 years of ball.
Yeah.
Add his fantastic bat in, and I mean, we've talked about teams just getting spoiled with the production of a certain position. That's what it was. You don't have shortstops like that.
No, shortstop is a very hot position right now. We have a lot of good young shortstops. O'Neal Cruz, he's got the size of Cal Ripken Jr. right now, but other than that, it's
And you're hoping for a contact guy that hits maybe 280 to make up for their good glove. That's what you're looking for in a shortstop. If you have a guy that's hitting home runs and can get on base consistently, that's just gravy.
And is going to play consistently. You knew he was going to play every day.
All the time.
Yeah, he's not going to miss anything. You good luck keeping him off the field. You're going to have to fight him to keep him off the field. Of course, it wasn't just him. It was definitely a family thing. Bill Ripken, also a fantastic defender, but Cal Ripken was just one of the best ball players in the history of the game. A special one that'll go down in history. His record, I don't think will ever be touched. It's unbelievable, unfathomable.
They won't let
almost.
Players try it anymore.
No. Let's head to number 2. Another guy who had a very, very long career with the Orioles, Brooks Robinson.
Yep.
This one was the only reason he's not number 1 is because Cal Ripken Jr. was special. That tells you how good Brooks Robinson was. 267, 322, 401 slash line. Those numbers dipped as he got older.
Of course.
But 268 career home runs, 1,357 RBIs with the Orioles, 860 walks, 2,848 hits with Baltimore, the 732 OPS, incredible defense. We talk about how spoiled the Orioles were with defense. Brooks Robinson is another one of those guys. You have to be a special defender to earn the nickname the human vacuum cleaner. This guy was just insane baseball player that a lot of people don't really think about when they think of the all-time greats.
Yeah. The best defensive third baseman the game has ever seen.
Absolutely.
You mentioned those stats, and that doesn't, defensive stats are so hard to track because other than errors, I mean, you have putouts, you have assists, and I'll get to that in a minute for sure. But you just you can't show how impactful a guy on defense really was. You can only see how often he messed up.
A number.
Right. This guy won an MVP award, 18 All-Star Game appearances, an All-Star Game MVP, a World Series MVP, and 16 straight Gold Gloves. That's right. He took his first Gold Glove home in 1960. Not a single third baseman in the American League got to claim another one from him until 1976. Almost 2 decades later, that award was his and his alone.
And that was towards the very tail end of his career when he gave that up.
Very tail end. Yes, like final 2 years, if I remember right. Just insane. He's number 40 on the MLB's all-time assists list. Every single player above him is either a shortstop or a second baseman. There's no one else that even comes close when you're talking about anywhere else on the field.
Yeah.
He also leads all third basemen in putouts in the history of the MLB. Like I said, it's hard to quantify defensive worth, but he still has the stats to be able to help you paint a picture there. If it weren't for Cal Ripken, he'd own nearly all of the franchise records we spoke about earlier. He spent 23 years with the Orioles. That's the second most ever all-time one player, one team in the history of the MLB. 23 years with the same club. That is just, it's crazy that your career's that long, but the fact that you stay with the same team for that entire time is just special. And the way he connected with the fans was just as unique as the kind of player he was. There's a writer, Ted Patterson. He's a Orioles beat writer. And he said it best. He said, other stars had fans. Robbie made friends. If you went for an autograph, he'd figure out if you were a cat or a dog person and what your parents did for work. I mean, just, it was insane how much of a connection he built with that fan base. Add that to his post-career involvement, which I know we don't include when we're making these lists, but broadcaster and just benefactor of that entire team and city. He is an absolute idol for the people of Baltimore.
Yeah, icon. And I doing research found that many people made the joke that if you knew Brooks Robinson, you were on a first name basis. And it wasn't just to tell the difference between him and Frank Robinson. It was because he cared about people. He was a people person, which is
he knew
just
your first
so
name
special.
too.
Exactly, which I'm awful with names, so I can't even imagine how many names he remembered. Unbelievable career, unbelievable person. Maybe the top 2 best people on and off the field that we've ever had on the Mount Rushmore right here for these two. So that's pretty special in itself. Number 3, we are going to go away from batters, and we're going to move to the greatest pitcher in Baltimore Oriole history without question. It's Jim Palmer. 2 different stints. The first one was very short. The second one was much longer and much more fruitful for both him and the franchise. Unbelievable what this guy was able to do. When he was on the mound, it was win day for Baltimore. They're like, okay, just score 3-4 runs and we're going to be in a good spot. We're probably going to win this baseball game. 268 career wins with Baltimore. I'm not even going to talk about his losses because I hate losses as a pitching metric, but a 2.86 career ERA. That is mind-boggling. A 1.18 career whip, 2,212 career strikeouts with the Orioles, 211 complete games with Baltimore. The franchise leader in pretty much every pitching category statistic, wins, innings, shutouts, complete game, strikeouts. Really ridiculous everything he was able to do. And hey, he was also an underwear model, so he can do it all on and off the field. This guy, a man with many hats, man, not a guy you want to go up and face in the batter's box. I wish I could find some way to go back and watch him face Nolan Ryan when they were both in their primes. That would have been special. Take all my money.
Absolutely. Yeah. 3-time Cy Young winner, 6-time All-Star, 4 Gold Gloves, 2 ERA titles, and 3 World Series championships. He won a World Series game in 3 different decades. As a pitcher, 3 different decades, World Series W behind your name. Just incredible. He's been a part of every single World Series appearance that the O's have ever had as a team. That's 66, 69, 70, 71, 79, and 83. He has 646 in their World Series appearances. So if they want to go back to the World Series, they got to bring him back. That's what I'm hearing. He is the youngest pitcher ever in the MLB to pitch a shutout. He was just under 21 years old when he tossed one against the reigning champions, the 66 Dodgers, in the playoffs, no less. After that, he really struggled with injuries. He got sent down, could have been swiped by the Royals or the Pilots in that expansion draft. He was passed on. He was hurting. That's what it was. His body was broken down and hurt. He goes to a basketball game, a Bullets game, before they were the Wizards. They were the Bullets. And sits next to this random guy, turns out to be a pharmaceutical rep. And the guy's like, hey, you should try indomethacin. And presto, he stops hurting. And he can throw 95 miles an hour again. And he just never looks back. And like you mentioned, I know you don't love the win-loss records for comparing pitchers, but all this guy seemed to do was win games. The winningest pitcher in the entire 1970s, 8 seasons with 20 or more wins, 12 seasons with 15 or more wins. Even though he had some clashes with ownership and teammates, he was just the embodiment of that team's success.
And really cool that he got to play with prime Brooks Robinson and very good Cal Ripken Jr. I'm not going to quite say it was prime in his early portion of his career, but that is really, could you imagine having a pitcher and you're like, oh man, I'm losing Brooks. Brooks did so much for me. And then Cal Ripken Jr. comes in to save the day. That is pretty cool for him.
He actually fought with his third baseman in a game after Robinson was gone. And he blamed Robinson for the fight. He's like, if you've got the human vacuum cleaner getting a 998 fielding percentage, yeah, I'm going to be pissed off at my guys having 4 errors a season. What is this? So,
and 4 errors, that's pretty. That's not bad for many teams. So, yeah, Palmer definitely a little spoiled with his defense, but man, he didn't necessarily need that defense all too often with how he was able to pitch. Really incredible.
Right.
Number 4, we both went Eddie Murray.
Yep.
You talked about Brooks Robinson is pretty much second in every category except for home runs. That's where Eddie Murray really shined as a power hitter. 294, 370, 498 slash line, 343 career home runs with Baltimore, 1,224 RBIs, 884 walks, was very feared. People were very careful with him. 2,080 career hits and 868 OPS. I mean, just the middle of the lineup kind of guy that you needed with the guys around him, whether it was Cal Ripken Jr., or I know he didn't really play with Brooks Robinson, but a few games. Brooks Robinson, you need a guy that can go deep, that puts the fear in pitchers that have to be careful with every single pitch. Eddie Murray, he was a pretty feared slugger just before really the golden days of the power hitter in the 90s.
Yeah, steady Eddie. You know, that's exactly what he was. Steady as they come. Nabbed a Rookie of the Year, got 8 All-Star Game appearances, 3 Gold Gloves, 3 Silver Sluggers, was consistently in the top 5 for MVP runnings. Never quite got there, but just one of the top players every single year. He's the type of player that any team would kill for to be on their team. Career leader in sac flies. I love that. You know, you got the home run ball, sure. If you ain't getting the home run, at least bring the guy in. And he did that more than anyone else that has ever played the game. Great connections with the city and those awesome sideburns. I mean, those were, yes, top notch. There was such an uproar in Baltimore when he got traded. People compared that to the Baltimore Colts leaving at midnight. They were so upset with ownership trading away their champion that they compared it to Irsay's midnight run. So, I mean, just top notch.
That sack fly stat is extremely cool, because how often do we get frustrated with guys leaving a runner stranded on third when you just have to really put the ball in play? So Eddie Murray did just that. So we agreed on all of our 4 main spots for the Mount Rushmore. Honorable mention, I went with Frank Robinson, the other player that's in the Hall of Fame as a Baltimore Oriole, and also Mike Messina, who went in with no logo. He couldn't decide between the Orioles and Yankees. He was really good with both of them, so I'm glad he went with no logo, because that'd be a tough decision there. Frank Robinson, I mean, just an iconic sports figure. You want to talk about all he did for the game. First black manager in baseball history. That's a pretty big deal. The only reason he didn't get a little bit of a bigger look is because he just didn't have quite the amount of service time as Eddie Murray. And Mike Messina, I mean, you want to talk about a guy who's going to go out there and give you 7 innings every single night. Messina was that guy. Never really the top pitcher in all of baseball. That guy you're like, oh, when he takes the mound, we might get a run off of him. But you knew you weren't going to get more than 3. It was quality outing after quality outing after quality outing for him his entire career. And a guy, when I think of him, I still think of him with the Baltimore Orioles. But who are your honorable mentions?
I also had Moose and Frank Robinson, and I had to include Adam Jones. I just, especially, you know, our generation, you think of the Orioles, you're thinking Adam Jones. And part of that might be the Mariner fan in me, and the sadness that comes along with that. But yeah. And who did we get for that again?
George Sherrill.
Right.
You don't remember the great things he did for the Seattle Mariners?
Right.
Historic season. Yeah.
Right.
It was definitely a whiff on that trade. And Adam Jones, I loved watching him play. I'll never forget, he wasn't wearing an Orioles uniform, but when he robbed that home run in the World Baseball Classic in 2017, one of the coolest catches, one of the most electric catches I've ever seen. You would have thought that was for the final out of the World Series. It was so cool to see him do that against Manny Machado. Just a special, special moment. But there you have it. Once again, our Mount Rushmore for the Baltimore Orioles: Cal Ripken Jr., Brooks Robinson, Jim Palmer, and Eddie Murray. Pretty historic franchise for the Baltimore Orioles. Some very, very good years, some very tough years, but it looks like they're about to turn the corner once again and get back to the playoffs. Next week, we are going to stay in the American League. We're going to go ahead and hop on the Minnesota Twins. That'll be next week's team. That is going to be a fun one. It's a very tough one. Maybe some more modern guys once again. That is it's going to be interesting next week. I'm hoping we have some differences, because we're agreeing too much as of late. It's rough. But that'll do it for this edition of our Mount Rushmore series. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap this episode up with some NFL talk. 6 weeks into the season, who are the teams to beat, and who are those teams that are looking at that number 1 pick? Jake and I give you our top 5 and bottom 5 in the NFL. That's coming up next year on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
Cheap insurance is nice, but none of that matters if your insurance company isn't there when you need them most. When you are looking for a trusted insurance company, well, it's our name, Clear Choice Insurance. We represent multiple companies to get you the best possible price and coverage for home, car, and business plans. The Clear Choice Pros will craft the perfect plan to fit your needs and budget. Check us out at clearchoiceinsurance.us. Make the clear choice with Clear Choice Insurance.
Pacific Mobile Structures are big supporters of kids and athletics. If you are in need of temporary office space on a work site or for overflow space, or if your building is in need of major renovation, Pacific Mobile Structures can keep your company at work. Pacific Mobile Structures offers everything from traditional modular classroom space to complete multi-purpose college campus buildings, including Sage Classrooms, which combine the latest in healthy learning environments with the best in green building practices. Pacific Mobile Structures can also offer you permanent space for a fraction of the cost to build your own. Go online to check out Pacific Mobile Structures.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Let's finish up this episode with some football talk. Jacob, you and I decided to look at not only our top 5 teams through 6 weeks of the NFL season, but we also went ahead and ranked the bottom 5 teams as well so far. Top 5, 1 and 2 seem pretty obvious. I'm going to go ahead and give my top 5
Even
to
1
start.
through 3, I guess.
Yeah, one is I still have the Buffalo Bills. I just think they look like the most complete team. I think they played a much tougher schedule than anyone else and have come out looking pretty strong, pretty healthy, except for, of course, the loss of Micah Hyde. But other than that, they look really solid. There's been rumors that they're in trade talks, potential deal for Christian McCaffrey, which would just
That would be
completely,
scary.
yeah, it'd make this team
Can you
even,
imagine?
they're already terrifying. But imagine, yeah, adding Christian McCaffrey, it just would be downright unfair. So I have Buffalo still number 1. Number 2, I have Philly, the last undefeated team. The Eagles coming off a strong win on Sunday Night Football over the Cowboys. This team, I know that they were a pretty trendy pick to be a sleeper team, but they look really, really solid. Jalen Hurts has taken a massive strides. You talked about A.J. Brown last week. Looks like a completely different player. I still want to see them get the ground game going a little bit more, get Miles Sanders involved. It seems like they're trying to do that a bit more here in the last couple of weeks. And then the defense just continues to make plays. Darius Slay looks like just a top tier cornerback all of a sudden this year. Looks really, really good. So I got the Eagles at 2. At 3, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes things. That loss to Buffalo wasn't a bad loss. The loss to Indy obviously was, no offense. That's the game that the Chiefs need to win.
Yeah.
It seems like he's building Patrick Mahomes, that is building a relationship with Juju. They're getting on the same page a little bit more. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is starting involved on offense a little bit more. We've talked about it every single week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire having the best season of his career, and also that defense, not elite, but not just an absolute cakewalk like they have been the last couple of years. At number 4, here's where things get a little weird. I got the New York Giants. I just bumped them up to 4. They've played some pretty tough teams. Of course, maybe Green Bay isn't as tough as we thought they were. They're coming off a really good win over Baltimore. Their only loss was to Dallas. That is going to be able to take advantage of the weakness that is the New York Giants offensive line. Saquon Barkley, though, he might be the best running back in the league so far this season. The defense is coming up with some key plays, some key takeaways. Daniel Jones, he doesn't look like a bad quarterback at all. I don't know if he can go win you a Super Bowl, but he's definitely got them towards the top of the NFL. Number 5, and the only difference is between the Giants and my number 5 is, I think, strength of schedule. I've got the Vikings at 5. I just don't think they've played or beaten as good of a team as the New York Giants have. That's nothing against the Vikings. It's just a scheduling thing. I think that they could very well be better than the Giants. This offense is insane right now. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen starting to get more involved. Irv Smith Jr. seems like he might be finally having his really good season as a tight end. And Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison, even if Cook's banged up, Madison, he doesn't skip a beat. That pass rush is getting home plenty. The secondary is holding up. There's just not a lot to dislike about the Vikings right now, except for that they're in the NFC North.
Yeah, I'm going to be echoing you a lot here. I've got the same teams, not quite the same order. Number 1, I do have the Bills. Like you said, there is no team that is more complete than the Bills. Elite quarterback, excellent throwing targets, top-notch defense. They have played a lot tougher squads than some of the other teams on this list. And they've had some really tight games, even with those really good teams. And they've dominated the lesser teams. And that's something you just can't look away from. A lot of teams kind of play down to who they're going against. There's been a lot of struggles. I mean, comes to my 49ers versus Bears. Just what happened there. Chiefs to the Colts, like you mentioned. And Bills, they don't shy away from just shutting down an inferior team. So I still have them at number 1. Number 2, I also have the Eagles. I mean, they are undefeated. Their strength of schedule has been a lot easier than the Bills or the Chiefs. Just no way around that. Still, that offense is scoring. The secondary is coming together very nicely. I wouldn't want to play them right now, so I'm putting them at number 2. Number 3, I do have the Chiefs as well. Couple of heart stoppers landing on kind of both sides of the win-loss columns. Chiefs have looked absolutely unbeatable at times and absolutely clueless at others. But when they're firing on all cylinders, there isn't a scarier offense in the league. And that is 100% Mahomes and Kelsey and their supporting staff. So it is what it is. Got them at 3. 4, I have the Vikings. they've cut it close a lot. Talking about playing down to some opponents, but they take care of business at the end. They can close it down and get the wins. You can't say the Vikings aren't in it to win it in any single game. Their only loss was to the undefeated Eagles. So they're right there in the mix. Number 5, also have the Giants. And that just seems weird to say. We've said all year, time to sell on the Giants. It's not going to get better than this. And then they find ways to win. Their defense absolutely neutralized Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson the last 2 weeks. That defense, if you can keep your offense in the game against opponents like that, and then you have this one-man powered offense in Saquon Barkley, you're going to have the opportunity to take the games and take the wins. And then look at their next few games. They've got the Jags, the Hawks, the Texans, and the Lions. Giants might get on a serious roll here. So I'm putting them, right there in top 5 too.
And I know Giants fans, they're going to have that thought in the back of their head. Okay, it has to fall apart at some point. Like you said, with that schedule, maybe a loss in that group of games, maybe one. But other than that, I think they roll through that. And I couldn't even tell you who the loss is going to come against. Let's now go to the other end of the spectrum, maybe where our teams are a little bit closer to being rather than in the top 5, the bottom 5.
Whoa.
I'm sorry. It is what it is. Who are your bottom 5 teams?
So number 28, I have the Bears. Bears defense has been playing surprisingly well, but that offense is struggling. A measly 7 points against the Commanders is just embarrassing, especially considering you had 3 separate drives where you were within the 5-yard line and you get 0 points on the board. That drug their average down to 15.5 points per game so far this year. You are not going to win football games with 15.5 points a game very often. That 15.5 points per game is second worst in the league, only behind my number 29 team, actually, and the Denver Broncos. That offense is abysmal. 15.2 points per game. After you make the biggest splash of the entire offseason, you cannot have that sleepy of an offense. No one is on the same page. Their defense has been their saving grace, but honestly, they haven't really faced that great of offenses yet either. So expect some major meltdowns once December comes around, because their schedule is going to get a lot harder and they are not going to be able to have a prayer if their offense doesn't figure it out real quick. Number 30, I've got the Commanders. A win over the Bears does not do much for this team, especially when you lose your quarterback for a month or two in that kind of embarrassing win. So now you've got Taylor Heineke taking this underperforming squad and see if he can't squeak out a couple of wins in Wentz's absence. But they're playing the Packers, Colts, Vikings, and Eagles over the next 4 weeks. So I really doubt it. Maybe 1, maybe 2. I mean, we're hoping 0 wins. You and I.
I'd like for them to beat the Vikings. I'd really love that.
Sure. Do you think that Taylor's got it in him? No. 31. I've got the Texans. This is, bottom 2 right here. Now, Texans are struggling to figure themselves out. They've only been outscored by 13 points. That's their point differential all year. The defense kind of doing their job. They just fired their VP of football operations. That was kind of well accepted by the fans. Fans are ready for any head they can to roll.
Yeah.
They're just lost. That's all it is to it. I mean, Lovie Smith still has faith in the squad, and they're showing a bit of promise in their young guns, Damian Pearson, Davis Mills. But their stats and their record both show how underperforming the rest of the squad has been. It's just they need to figure out what it takes to win games. And then last and least, we have the Carolina Panthers. There is not a lot going the Panthers' way right now. Head coach, fired. Starting quarterback, hurt and sucking when he's not hurt. Wide receiver, Matt, we had Antonio Brown show up in a Panthers uniform this last week. And now he's already gone. Maybe Robbie will play better with Kyler, but yikes, that's just a meltdown. And then speaking of trades, they're wanting to ship old CMC now. So I'm sure he's not going to complain about getting kicked off of this sinking ship, but these guys are ready for the season to be done already. And it's October.
Yeah, not a good sign for the Carolina Panthers. My bottom five, again, we've got the same teams in a different order. So I'm going to start at 28. I've got the Washington Commanders. I mean, they do have a couple of wins over the Jags, who are all of a sudden are falling apart, and they did beat the Bears. That's why I had to put them ahead of the Bears. I'm not sure how big of a drop-off there is from Carson Wentz to Taylor Heineke. We've seen Heineke. He's, somewhat of a okay quarterback, I guess. But I'm going to give them the slight edge over the Bears. I think that they have the better offensive weapons than Chicago. I don't even know if it's close, and they are getting healthier on defense. But until they figure out how to actually score, I can't bump them up any higher than 28. 29, I've got the Denver Broncos as well. You hit the nail right on the head. You went out there, you got Russell Wilson, you paid him a boatload of money. We heard all this noise about how great the weapons are in Denver. I don't know, Jacob. They don't look too special to me. They look like a bunch of average Joes to below average. They look terrible. Seattle, I think you can officially say, has already won the trade. That is just a disaster for Denver. And yeah, the defense has looked all right, but you mentioned it. What's the best offense they've faced? The Raiders. That's it. The Raiders have one win so far this season. So that is not saying much there. They still have to play Kansas City twice. Good luck figuring that one out. They are in deep trouble. Russ looks just depressed with his life all of a sudden. They're a mess. At number 30, I've got the Bears. I have a lot of issues with Chicago, but Justin Fields, he's got problems. I don't think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think I missed that one completely. I thought he was going to be the best quarterback of that draft. The defense can't really stop anybody except for Washington, but that's not really saying much. Their run defense is putrid. They are terrible at stopping the run. And then they don't have any weapons. Darnell Mooney is not a number one wide receiver in the NFL. Why are they not riding David Montgomery more?
Because they don't have an offensive line to do it.
They don't have an offensive line to protect Justin Fields, so at least let your running back go out there and he knows the hits are coming, rather than Fields, who's getting blindsided.
Hurt him even more. He's already hurt every other game. They're also just in trouble.
Never wear those uniforms ever again. Those are disgusting. Retire them.
That goes
them,
for most of the NFC North. I'm just saying.
Whoa. I'm going to need you to watch your mouth a little bit. Number 31, I've got the Carolina Panthers here. You mentioned it, injured quarterback. They're starting to sell, but they do have a lot of talented pieces. That's why I give them a slight edge over number 32, who you guys all know what's coming. But man, Robbie Anderson, I'm not going to say he went full AB. I'm not going to say he went full on, but he was flirting with it quite a bit, getting kicked to the locker room and now getting shipped out to Arizona. And that's coming from a guy who played with Sam Darnold in the Jets. So it has to take a lot for him to lose it. I hope he figures things out in Arizona. I think he's very talented. I'm not so sure he will. But for the Panthers, I mean, if McCaffrey's gone, this team is without question the bottom team in the NFL. He single-handedly is keeping them from that 32 spot. Also, please get DJ Moore to Green Bay. We absolutely need him. So please, if they're going to blow everything up, get him in a Packers uniform. Number 32, Houston Texans. They just don't have much. You talked about Davis Mills, Brandon Cooks, Damian Pierce. That's it. Can you even name another Houston Texan? I think Kyrie Fairburn might still be their kicker. Other than that, there's nothing there. They have no defense. they really don't even know how to move the ball because teams can just take away Brandon Cooks and load up the box. That's what you have to do to beat the Texans. You're going to end up scoring points because that defense is just putrid. They're terrible. Like you said, they're starting to fire everyone. Lovie Smith, I don't think he's going to be the coach next season because they don't seem to be shy of firing people. Texans, they're the bottom team, but you could switch them out with the Panthers, and I wouldn't be able to argue very much. So it's a nasty bottom. The bottom of the league is really bad, but
yeah,
I will say I think this is the first year where it really feels like any given Sunday, anyone can beat anyone. It's been
crazy.
Pretty chaotic so far this season, and we're gonna have a chaotic week 7 come up. We'll have our picks coming out here this weekend as well for week 7 of the NFL season. Sean won again, so he's up 4-2 to 0, unfortunately for you.
Every week it's like one game. And it was the Chiefs. They had it, and then just gave it away.
I will tell that story that we were doing the math and you thought I was wrong, saying that you still had a chance.
Yeah, you're
to
like,
win.
hey, if these guys win, Sean and I have to do a tiebreak. And I'm like, wait a minute, what about Jacob? I think Jacob's still in it. And then 2.5 seconds later, Jacob was no longer in it.
I responded saying, no, if the Chiefs win, then you win. So you're not going to be involved in tiebreaker anyway. You said, oh, I thought you were counting me out. My bad. And then, next play, interception. I'm like, now you're out. Yeah. It was pretty comical on that Sunday. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Once again, thank you for hanging out with us here. Next week, of course, we got another week of the NFL season. Who knows what's going to happen any single week with the NFL, and also we'll have a few games into the AL and NLCS we'll be able to talk about. I don't know if any series will necessarily be wrapped up. Hopefully not. I hope they both go game 7, but we will find out for sure next week, and we'll have another edition of our Mount Rushmore series. But that'll do it for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We will see you next week right here on the Eli Sports Network.